Hi, I'm David Jones. For 30 years, I've worked with people who cooperate in large knowledge development processes that answer questions like, how will we innovate and supply cochlear devices globally? How will we coordinate shipping iron ore from Western Australia to the world? And how can we effectively govern a national superannuation scheme? Behind all of those projects, my driving interest has been to find what is common in our conversational interactions when we talk to get work done. Or as the question seemed to me, how do we make by speaking? This series of 5 videos is my answer to that question. Answering the question covers a great deal of interdisciplinary ground. In this first video, I provide a necessary but brief backdrop to complexity. And then in videos 2 and 3, I introduce the strange attractor that underlies our participation in making by speaking. Humans make by speaking. This series of presentations introduces the strange attractor that is common to all human making by speaking. This MBS attractor was discovered by David Jones during studies that commenced in 1990 and is now being researched and commercialised by Dylan Jones and David Jones. Much of our education has focused on things that can be taught bit by bit, like maths and grammar, and on ideas we can build up, brick on brick. But if we stop to look at how we behave, not all of our knowing works like that. For example, there are some things in the world that are dynamic, and our knowledge of them comes by watching them in action over time. Think of a garden sprinkler. You can never predict where one drop would go, but you can rely on the pattern to choose where to put your sprinkler or even what sprinkler to buy. We don't get an understanding of how to use these systems by analysing the details. What is ideal for deciding how to act in the world is sometimes that we understand the pattern and the simple rules that create it. These dynamic systems have a pattern that only reveals itself over time. Finding attractors is done by following many paths a system might follow. That pattern reveals an attractor. Attractors are everywhere in nature. For example, death is an attractor every animal experiences, yet our journeys through life trace totally individual paths. Double pendulum will always make an attractor that is a bowl or with sufficient energy, perhaps a sphere. Sometimes the expressions of an attractor are quite irregular in form, and we call those strange attractors. The variety of single expressions of a strange attractor can be huge, but humans can often still see similarities. Systems that have many separate yet interdependent parts and that are responsive to the environment are also widespread in nature. We call them complex adaptive systems, or just CAS. Ants that build bridges or weave nests, or termites that build mounds are great examples of CAS. These insects get together and produce patterns we would never predict if we only looked at all the individual parts. Who would have thought you could get a 3-metre high air-conditioned termite mound if you just looked at a flying ant? In some cases, we can't see regularities in the pattern, but we do understand the simple rules that drive it. Climate change has just one simple rule. An increase in the Earth's average surface temperature is driving changes across the globe. But in its huge array of outworkings, its pattern is very hard to see. Sometimes, even when things do have very complex patterns, we can find simple rules that help us understand otherwise mystifying phenomena. In the case of the way birds flock, we have been able to imitate the behaviour in computers using 3 simple rules. Fly toward the centre gives cohesion. match the speed of others gives alignment, and avoid collisions, stay a little bit separate. In simple contexts like the garden sprinkler, we don't bother trying to understand the rules. But for really complex situations like weather prediction, understanding the rules and the pattern can make a huge difference to our lives. It turns out that something as complicated as the weather has at least one core pattern and some simple rules. The El Nino Southern Oscillator is a complex system. Modelling its pattern means governments can prepare for risks of famine in rural India or for tornado insurance premiums in the USA. What about complex and dynamic human systems? Many human activities have also been understood as complex adaptive systems. After all, they often consist of rich interactions between the actors. Separate human actors repeat certain behaviours in response to the environment, and that gives rise to coherent order. There's no external set of instructions for the interactions or for the emergent patterns. People in cars are an example, where a great deal of modelling has been done to try and find the simple rules that could help design our way out of traffic jams. And there are many large systems that people are trying to understand as CAS. Roger Martin is talking about the US economy in these terms. Diane Larson-Freeman researches second language acquisition. Ralph Stacey looks at organisations, and Nancy Cook and colleagues study team coordination dynamics. Identifying those systems as having CAS features is one thing, but describing the attractor and or identifying where the simple rules for a human activity might lie is itself a hugely complex task. And in human systems, so far only minor examples have been identified. The stadium wave that originated in Mexico is one we've actually learned. Stand up when the person to your left stands up, sit down when the person to your left sits down. This is a simple rule that has nothing to do with waves, but produces waves when performed by adjacent independent agents. Humans also quite literally play with complexity. We make the simple rules first and then let the emergent patterns surprise and amuse us. The stadium wave and sports point to an important feature of human CAS. We can work with the rules and create new outcomes. Our capacity to cooperate in our industries, in our living together, and in our governance are issues about human activity that are a very long way from play. Would the discovery of an attractor for that cooperative activity lead to abilities to skill ourselves to better diagnose and more wisely design our outcome-focused enterprises? In the everyday and in the profoundly important arenas of human activity where we are cooperating toward an outcome, no one has identified a universal attractor and no one has described the simple rules until now. Human cooperation toward outcomes is a complex adaptive system, and it turns out there is a discernible attractor that underlies this CAS. That is, the way humans cooperate toward outcomes has attractor features that are observable and measurable. In the next video in this series, we will describe that attractor.